So this interview obviously is in response to you declaring that Oregon State is a sanctuary university. Has Oregon State always been a sanctuary university, or is this a new thing that's just been established?
Well, this all has come up as a consequence of the election, which it's hard to recall was 2 weeks ago. And it all has come up in advance of the inauguration of the president-elect, which won't be for about another 8 weeks. So there's a lot of speculation about, so what just happened, what's about to happen, how do we deal with it? On the very serious side of it all, there are a lot of students, particularly, and I think it affects staff and faculty as well, who are very apprehensive. I think the president-elect has made some very inappropriate statements during the course of the campaign. Campaigns are campaigns, but you're supposed to say what you mean and mean what you say. I think that's the way most people try to live their lives. So people take the president-elect at his word when he talks about things like, having some kind of registry for Muslims and rounding up undocumented students on campuses and things. And so there's just a tremendous apprehension. I had a meeting about 2 days ago, I guess on Monday, we had a town hall. There's a small number of students there, but one young lady, spoke about the climate, and not just that there are people who personally are concerned about their own situation, but maybe family member situations, and that there seem to be a lot of students who are sort of, I'm okay, you're okay, it doesn't affect me, so I don't care. And we do have to remember that, there was an election, and they do have consequences, and there are a lot of people who are very happy about the fact that Donald Trump has been elected President of the United States. So part of what we try to do is just give people a sense of what the facts are and what we do and don't control, and hopefully that gives them a certain level of comfort about what it is that may be coming. The state itself, in the process of trying to get answers about what it means to be a sanctuary university or a sanctuary state, when I had a little visitation from student, staff, and faculty last week, they said, well, we want you to declare, that we're a sanctuary university. And I said, I'm there. What does it mean? So I think that's part of what we've been trying to figure out. Well, it turns out that we are, in fact, a sanctuary state. So I guess by virtue of that, we're a sanctuary university, whether I would have declared it or not. And what it means, in effect, is there is information that we always provide to the federal government in connection with student financial aid and other sorts of things. But what it means to say we're a sanctuary university in a sanctuary state is that we have no role in accommodating the enforcement, for example, of immigration, background checks, or anything of that sort. There are places where areas, as I said, financial aid, others where for federal reporting purposes we have to provide information. So what we made very clear was that we have no intention of doing anything that we're not compelled to do, either by warrants or court orders, to help with the enforcement of immigration, background checks, actions, whatever, that we are first and foremost here to protect and support our students. Staff are actually required to demonstrate that they have, either the appropriate visas or that they are U.S. citizens for employment. So we're really talking about students and students' families, although staff and faculty could have family members who are undocumented that they're very worried about. So what we've made it clear is we're not going to do anything to make it easy for someone to start poking around and finding out who has legal status and who doesn't, unless we're compelled by a court order or a warrant. So I mean, on the one hand, I think some people have found that reassuring. Some people, and other people, are telling me, well, you can't, you're breaking the law, and federal funding is going to be withheld. Well, we're not breaking the law. Courts have ruled that we can have that kind of sanctuary status where we're not cooperating with the enforcement of immigration actions, and it's within the law, and we're not, as I said, breaking the law, but we are doing the maximum amount we can to protect students and to help them protect their families. You may know already that ASOSU has legal counsel, and that legal counsel is available for all students. So if they have questions or concerns about their own status, they can use that service. And the legal advisor to student government also has information about other legal services that could be obtained at reasonable, affordable prices for others who are not affiliated with the university but have concerns. So at this point, that's really the most we can do, and we don't actually know what, if anything, is going to happen once the president-elect is in office, whether there'll be any sort of attempt to find people and force them to leave the country. That just remains to be seen.
Okay. So could OSU potentially lose its taxpayer funding?
No, and then I should have mentioned that this business about losing federal funding is stupid stuff. There is nothing in law that says we have to comply with requests for information about potentially undocumented people or our federal funds are at risk. That's not the case. And if somebody tried to enforce something along those lines, we'd be in court. And there would be a lot of legal support for preventing any such heavy-handed action from taking place. So we don't anticipate that something that we really have to be concerned about. I guess the one thing that's concerned me most on the negative side, I think there are people who are not inappropriately concerned about they don't want their university breaking the law and not enforcing something that they're supposed to be enforcing or whatever. And I hope in response to individuals who've asked, I've been able to clarify that. But I've gotten a few, not many, only a few, really hateful messages from people. There are some very troubled people out there who I think are feeling emboldened by the election results, and I hope that the new administration will take that on directly, that at some point the president-elect will be very clear about what he does not find acceptable, and that will maybe discourage some of the worst kind of acting out that I think we've been seeing. I heard from students about people riding around in trucks with Confederate flags and yelling things at them and others, and all of that stuff. It was stupid and not acceptable 2 weeks ago. It's still stupid and unacceptable, but as I say, I think some people feel emboldened by the results of the election, and that's really unfortunate, and where we can take action, we need to hold such people accountable. But again, we ultimately want to come together as a country. So there are people on both sides of the equation who voted, and we are a democracy. We make the best of the outcomes we get, hopefully. And so we need to figure out where there is common ground, where we can do some things that benefit individuals in their lives and benefit the country, rather than simply lock horns and have nothing get accomplished. I think there are people who look at some of the proposals that are out there around infrastructure investment. I think both Democrats and Republicans have argued in favor of that for years. So I always used to tell people, this time is unlike any election I've ever seen, but I always used to tell people that whoever gets elected as President of the United States, you want him to be the best president we ever had, because it's our lives they're screwing around with. So you're not rooting for whoever is president, regardless of what your politics are, to be a total abysmal failure, because that means they're probably doing a lot of things that are hurting a lot of people who can't protect themselves from bad policy. So you're always hoping that somehow people get smarter and more balanced in their behavior when they assume the office of the presidency, and we get better rather than worse results than we've gotten in the past.
So back to the protest that took place on Wednesday. Was that the first time you'd heard about a sanctuary campus, and was that protest solely the reason that you declared the OSU as a sanctuary?
No, I think there has been discussion about because in the campaign there was discussion about sanctuary cities and what does that mean, and I think very little clarity about what it meant. In a political environment, people like to not so much focus on definitions and focus on things that they think will energize their base. So I think there was a lot of misunderstanding about what a sanctuary city means, what a sanctuary state means, what a sanctuary university is, and I guess there was a call out that day, a week ago today, calling on students to, demonstrate on their campuses in favor of declarations of sanctuary. And there's been a lot of scrambling in the last week to find out, well, what does it mean to make such a declaration? I think we are clearer now that it means that we don't simply cooperate because the Immigration Service, for example, wants information about people that could determine whether they're here legally or not, that this is a nation of laws and will obey the law if required to do so, but that's a strength as well. I mean, it's the courts have the ability to stop people from overreaching and acting in ways that don't respect the rights of individuals, regardless of who they are. And we intend to take full advantage of that. I told the students when they came last Wednesday that I was for sanctuary, but I didn't actually know what it meant. But I'd try to find out. And I think at a moment of desperation, I told them that I was pretty sure I was going to see the governor the next day, because the President's Council was meeting in Salem, and that she's really smart, and maybe she knows something. So I actually did bring it up with her that the students had made this request, that I'm supportive of doing everything we can to give reassurances and protection to our students. And what did she know? And she told me that the state was, that obviously people in the higher, in the administration in the state were looking at how sanctuary state had been interpreted. Apparently, we passed a resolution or a statute in 2007 when I presume that's Governor Kulongoski was in office, probably when the issue of DACA first came up, students who were here illegally being able to go to college and so forth. And Oregon declared itself a sanctuary state, but it never got a lot of attention or tested. So I think there's been some effort to get clarity about what did we pass. It's a little bit like me saying, yeah, I'm for it. What did I just agree to? And then I know that the governor's, through some of her team and leadership in the state, has been in contact with our congressional delegation, trying to get clarity about what could be done at the federal level. For example, this business of you declare you're a sanctuary state, you're not going to do anything you're not compelled to do with respect to immigration except for warrants and court orders. What does that mean about what the Department of Education could do with respect to financial aid or whatever. So I think they're actually working on trying to get as much clarity around that as possible. But my understanding is there's just no basis for the concern, although I understand the concern that somehow we're going to have our federal funding cut off because of this position. And I think many colleges and universities across the country have sort of said pretty much what we've said. We're going to do what we can to protect students and their privacy.
And will this change the current way that the campus runs?
I don't expect it to. And, you know, sort of think about what you just asked. You asked me if this. I don't know what this is.
Okay.
I don't think you do either. So until we have an administration in office and it tells us what the this is that they think they're going to do that's different from what's happening now, it's pretty hard to know what we're going to do that's different from what we're doing now. But we can at least be clear about what we're not going to do. And that's what I was trying to provide with that statement, the assurance. We're not lining up to give out information about individuals and their whereabouts and their immigration status. We're not doing anything to deal with immigration questions until and unless, obviously, the courts tell us that we have to do things perhaps differently going forward. And even there, I would expect there would be challenges to court decisions if somehow they were to tell us we had to act differently than we have, or I've indicated we intend to act. There would be counter efforts to get the courts to block any kind of implementation of policies that were more invasive, more intrusive of people's rights and right to privacy, among other things.
And earlier you mentioned DACA. Would you mind explaining to me a little more?
Yeah, that's the program that says that effectively we're not providing information about students who are undocumented who apply and are able to get into colleges. And these are students who arrived in this country with adults, typically under 16, when they came here. So they didn't make decisions to enter the country illegally. They were part of a family or part of some kind of collaborative effort to bring adults and children into the country, and they ought to be held harmless. And we shouldn't be thinking about rounding them up and deporting them. There were a lot of inflammatory things said during the campaign, but nothing has actually changed. I mean, there is no policy that's being enforced that would lead to anything in contradiction to that. That's what we have to wait and see. What happens next, what doesn't. I don't know if you heard it yesterday. Apparently the president-elect said, he's not going to try to put Hillary Clinton in jail. Well, that was one of the popular chants, lock her up, et cetera, et cetera. So things are becoming clearer as we go along. What will be attempted, what won't be attempted. There will be a harsh dose of reality for the president-elect as there was for the current president. It's great to have ideas about what you want to do, and then there's this thing called Congress, that gets to appropriate or not appropriate money for things and gets to pass laws or not pass laws. And the president-elect is going to be facing a loyal opposition with very different ideas, perhaps, on a number of fronts than his own, just as President Obama has. And so the notion that you're going to announce 5 things you're going to do is great, but between here and there is quite a long and sometimes not possible journey. You can't always get from here to there just because you've declared what it is you want to do. So we have to see how things play out.
Okay. And how will you respond to issues that might arise from students or community members who disagree with Oregon State being a sanctuary university?
Well, I'm getting fan mail, and I try to explain to people what it means. You know, they want to know, you know, that I should be in jail, or that, you know, we're not enforcing the law, and how could we be violating federal law? And then I explain we're not violating federal law. We're doing our utmost to be supportive and protective of our students, and we intend to keep doing that. And the declaration is just to the extent we're in a very uncertain and troubled time for many people individually and for friends and loved ones. We want to make sure that amid all the noise, we are absolutely clear that we're there to be as supportive of students and others as we possibly can. But yeah, I mean, I've gotten some reactions quite negative to that. A lot positive. I mean, a lot of people have sort of said thanks, you know, and it's kind of, they just wanted reassurance that they thought that's where the university would be and supportive of them. But not hearing anything is not the same as being supportive. Sometimes you got to remind people that you want to do everything you can to be helpful to them, and they need to hear that. And then others draw their own conclusions about what that means. So you end up, there is no perfect sentence. So, you know, people look at the same words, and one is reassured and the other's pretty sure you're going to go to federal prison and your federal funds are going to be cut off, and how could you be that irresponsible? So it's, and everything in between. But most of the response I've gotten has just been very thank you for, you know, saying these things and making clear what you could. That helps you know, while we wait to see what actually does or doesn't happen.
Okay. And do you think this declaration is enough on the part of the administration, or do you think that more steps need to be taken?
I think it's all we can do at this point. I mean, what we're doing is, you know, certainly making it clear that the university is not going to be engaged in voluntarily giving up information on people around immigration issues, that there is the student legal services option available to students, and that office can also provide information about other lawyers who could be available to assist student families, for example. And you know, at this point, till we know more about what it is that we're dealing with, it's hard to know what else would be productive. I mean, in some sense, I worry about message fatigue as well. I mean, I'm sure students hang on my every word, but two missives in a week is probably enough, unless I had some pretty clear signals that, wow, this issue is out there, that issue is out there. If you know anything, tell us what you know. So you try not to engage in overkill. So hopefully, you know, what's needed to be said has been said until and unless the landscape changes, and that certainly isn't going to happen on President Obama's watch. So it's really, you know, in fact, what actually, if anything, is enacted in the term of the new president, and then, you know, we'll see how we can always err on the side of being protective and supportive of our students and their right to be here and get their education and realize their potential. You know, that's always where we're going to be, and what that requires is going to depend on what are the circumstances, say in March or June, what are the circumstances we face that we didn't have clarity about back in November or December. So it's staying vigilant, paying attention, and being prepared to take it as it comes and respond appropriately and quickly.
Good. And what do you think that students can do on a day-to-day basis to ensure that?
Well, I really hope that students will be supportive and understanding of each other. I mean, one of the things I found, you know, just kind of sad, I wouldn't say maybe heartbreaking is too strong, but there are students who are really in distress. I mean, they are incredibly fearful. And I mean, at some level, I get it. We all have issues to deal with, and we compartmentalize in life. And you know, if you're not here, not properly documented, maybe you don't know anyone who is. You never have known anyone who is. So your instinct is always, I got all these other things to worry about. This is not about me. So I think part of what our community is experiencing is people who are hurting are not seeing other people step up and be supportive of them. So I think what every student can do is, if you care about your fellow students, and I think faculty and staff, I would include them as well. If you see that people are hurting, and it would be nice to have a kind word or a statement of support, or an offer to listen or be there for them, just as with a family or friends, people ought to step up and be willing to do that. And I got the sense from one or two of the students who were there Monday afternoon that they're not seeing that part of what makes their distress that much greater is they see so many students seemingly walking around as if it's business as usual, and it's certainly not for them. So, I mean, to the extent people recognize that, they ought to make a little extra effort to reach out for people who are feeling very worried and very vulnerable.
As you mentioned, a lot of the feeling among students is fear, and some of the students I spoke to, they were just very fearful of the uncertainty and didn't know what was going to happen. Do you have anything to say to those students?
Well, you know, it's easy to tell people calm down. You know, until we know what we're dealing with, you're burning a lot of psychic and emotional energy, which may prove to be unfounded. But I mean, you can't turn emotions on and off. So I get it that there are many students who are very fearful and very much in distress. And again, I think I would just say, you know, it's we are not looking away from what's being suggested could happen in these areas. We're going to stay on top of it. To the extent there are meaningful actions we can take, we will do so as quickly as we possibly can, and try to give people assurances that you know, we need to see what it is that we're ultimately dealing with, not what we're afraid we're dealing with. And again, but I understand how that's very hard for people to, if you feel like that you're the target, it's pretty hard to feel that you ought to be able to not suddenly suspend worrying about things. I don't think there's anything to be done about that except for time to play out and for us to see where the new administration takes or tries to take policy, and then to what extent, if it's inappropriate, it can be stopped, and what the actions are that can be taken to rebuff efforts to round people up, and or you know, there's been talk about having a registry of Muslims. I mean, it's a lot of pretty nutty stuff out there, and until we are able to confront it, know what is being proposed, and explore what can be done through the courts and other means to push it back, it's hard to say what actions need to be taken and can be taken.
Those are all the questions I have for you. Is there anything else you'd like to add in general?
No, just that we are a community, and we get tested all the time. We've had situations in the past, whether it was the blackface incident or we had the Speak Out last year, I think, which was a learning opportunity for many of us. I think we just need to constantly be willing to come back to have conversations, difficult dialogue, try to demonstrate that at the end of the day we care about each other, we're supportive of each other, things that affect us differentially because maybe it affects you but not me doesn't mean I don't have a stake in trying to be supportive of you in whatever way I can. So I just hope the community can come together. You know, this is a time of year you talk about holidays and new beginnings and celebrations, and the best way I think to demonstrate one has the spirit of the holiday is through how you treat other people. And if you're callous, if you're disinterested, if you assume I'm okay, you're okay, and you never really connect with other people, that isn't what we usually think of as sort of having the holiday spirit. So I hope in this time of uncertainty, people will make an extra effort to be supportive of each other. Take the time to listen if that's what's needed. Give somebody a hug who needs a hug. Let them know that you do understand what their concerns are and you want to be as supportive as you can.
Great. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us
Sure.
today.
Well, thank you.
Great.
Appreciate you
Of course.
working on the day before the turkey.
Yeah. Of course, yeah.
It's a tough life.
Definitely.